Today I'm going to be learning more about the language used in Australia by looking at more Aussie slang, but this time it's dirty-ish Aussie slang words that confuse me as an American. So interested to see this. I'm sure, having watched a lot of Australian TV shows, that I've came across some of them. One that I do know is the word root. I think that can be used in a few different contexts, but I always enjoy hearing that one in TV shows. But tell me what you think about these. Tell me how commonly you use them. If there's any other dirty-ish slang words from Australia that are not in this video, please tell me about them in the comments. Can't wait to learn. Let's watch.
G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Caitlin. I'm an American writer living in beautiful Sydney, Australia. And there are some dirty Aussie words that really do confuse Americans. Some of them might not even be that dirty here in Australia, but in the States, oh boy. These can be dirty, filthy, sexy, offensive. The list goes on, so let's dive into some dirty Aussie words that confused this American the first time I heard them. Grab a Bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's get right into this video. Number one, and I'm not afraid to say the word, but I am going to have to censor it for YouTube because it doesn't like it. Number one is the C word. In the States, it is probably the most offensive thing that you can call a woman. And in all fairness, it's pretty offensive here in Australia too when you use it in that context. But other than the insult and the female body part, that word typically isn't used in the States. Here in Australia, while people don't go saying it every other word, it is a lot more common here, and it's typically in conjunction with some sort of descriptor, whether you're a mad C word, a funny C word, a sick C word. Those are all actually compliments. But if somebody is just flat out calling you a straight up C word, that's clearly an insult. You kind of have to take the word in context to how it's being used.
That's
in the
the same in
situation that it's
Scotland
being
as well.
used in.
We're exactly the same.
If you're fighting with
Can be
somebody and
positive
they
or
drop a
negative.
C word, chances are it's not going to be a compliment. But when I first came over here, I was surprised to hear people actually use it and use it in multiple different contexts. Number two is root, which is...
Root, yeah, this is my favourite. But the C word, definitely, I've said that before on videos. In Scotland, we're the same. Can be your best friend. You can say that to him very casually. Can be the person you dislike. Everything in between. It can be used to you on inanimate objects. Everything. We probably say it too much. We probably say it more than they do in Australia, actually.
Very different compared to the States. Here in Australia, they are not going to root for the home team like you hear in that old school song, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. No, root here is a very crude, kind of bogan way of saying fuck. So when you talk about Aussies rooting or having a root, they are not talking about cheering, they're talking about sex. So if they're good at it, they might actually be cheering afterwards. Number three is rubber.
Is there other
and
ways
to
you can
Aussies,
use it
this
as well?
is completely innocent. To Americans, it is not. Rubber in the States, besides material, means condom. So when you're in Australia and there are little kids asking for a rubber, clearly that's not what they're talking about. A rubber in Australia is an eraser.
Yeah,
So something that is
It's the same in the
completely
UK.
innocent to Aussies confuses the hell out of Americans the first time they hear it, especially because it could be coming out of a little kid's mouth. Number four is pash, and I heard this a few times before I actually understood what it meant. Pash is just to make out, but the reason it's pash is like it's passionately making out, so shortening it to pash.
Never realised that.
I swear Aussie slang is just on another level. So if anybody is pashing, having a pash, it just means that they're making out kind of intense. Number
Okay, this one, I'm going to guess this next one is the same way we use it in the UK as well. But pash, in the UK we have a lot of different words for like snogging, kissing. We call it like getting off with someone. Is there more words for, rather than pash, more synonyms of pash in
five,
Australia?
and this one gets Americans in trouble all over the world, not just in Australia, is Fanny, which is also an unfortunate nickname for any woman named Francine. But Fanny in Australia and the UK and I think a few other countries is actually a woman's vagina. So when a woman in the States is wearing a fanny pack, in Australia and other countries it's actually called a bum bag. You do not want to call it a fanny pack over here. You are going to get laughed at so much. Number six is Randy. So if your name is Randy, I feel so bad for you if you come to Australia. Randy is a word that people will use to describe being aroused or turn on. You're getting randy. You're feeling randy. So you can see why if somebody is named Randy and they come over here to visit, Aussies are probably going to pick on them. So I feel so bad if
I thought that
anybody's
would have
named
even
Randy
been used in the US
and they
as well.
decide to visit
That was
anywhere
kind of
outside the
universal,
US. Because in the US, that word is just a name. And number seven is crack on.
Crack on, yeah, that's very
Aussies probably
Australian.
know what that means. To Americans, it goes way over our heads. Crack on is something I'd heard a few times until I actually had it explained to me at some point. I thought cracking on was like, okay, maybe having a joke or making fun of somebody a little bit, which so makes sense because of how Aussies do crack on, which is flirting. Aussies are notorious for having that slightly dry, sarcastic sense of humor of taking the piss out of each other, of making fun of each other. So to my American ears, it does make sense that crack on would come across as picking on somebody, teasing somebody, joking with somebody, when in Australian, crack on actually means to flirt. So if you're out at the pub with somebody and some guy comes up to your friend and starts cracking on to them, they're not necessarily joking with them, although they probably are because they're trying to flirt with them. Number 8.
Yeah, that one's interesting because we use the same term in the UK, crack on, but it's more like to get something done, like I'm going to crack on with this work. Is it used in that similar context in Australia as well? But yeah, it's just one that's interesting that we still use it in the UK, but a kind of completely different reason.
8 is pissed. Typically in the States, pissed just means you're angry. Normally, like, you're really angry if you're pissed or you're pissed off. In Australia, pissed also means you're drunk. So if somebody in the pub is pissed, there's a small chance they could be angry, but most likely people mean that they're saying that they're drunk. Which is also why people say, like, I'm getting on the piss this weekend, basically means I'm planning on drinking a lot this weekend. And number 9, I feel like you guys already knew that this one was going to make the list, and that is thongs. Yes, it confuses so many Americans when they hear Aussies talking about needing to grab a pair of thongs. Because in the States, we all know that thongs are called flip-flops, and thongs in the States are typically what you call G-strings here in Australia. And G-strings in the States are also G-strings in Australia. Which, when you think about it, given the structure of an actual thong, it does make sense because that little bit does go between your toes to keep everything together. It makes sense to call them thongs. But to Americans, it is going to take a little while to get used to hearing and eventually saying thongs. It's taken me well over 2 years. I can say it with no problem. I don't bat an eye with it. But when I'm talking to American friends and family back home, I try to make sure that I say flip-flops. So that's it for this video, you guys.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, so for me it's interesting as well, not just to see the difference between America and Australia, but comparing to Britain as well. So it's like interesting, we've all got some things we use, but other words we don't use together and stuff like that. The 3 countries, maybe I'll make a video comparing the 3 countries, seeing the similarities and differences as well. But yeah, tell me what's your favourite word to say. For me, definitely root is like something we don't use in the UK, but I feel like it should be definitely, we should use it. We could bring that over. We could import it from Australia. But yeah, tell me if I'm sure there's other dirty-ish slang words in Australia. Please tell me about them in the comments. What's your favourite? Thanks.